following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local community-centered journalism today by signing up to be a monthly sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. It doesn't take much money to support local news.
Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. Filling in for Joe Pugh, I'm Jack Corfield. Today, we'll be speaking with City of Nanaimo's Manager of Transportation, Jamie Rose, to discuss the progress of Nanaimo's transit system. In particular, we'll be looking at the upcoming upgrades to the Country Club Transit Exchange. Welcome, Jamie Rose. You are the Manager of Transportation for the City of Nanaimo. I understand that you oversee city projects like the upgrades occurring right now at the Downtown Transit Exchange. Would you be able to give us an update on how that project is progressing and when those upgrades are planned to be completed?
The work on street is should be wrapping up probably in a few weeks, probably completed in the fall with all the final paint, landscape, etc. The transit component of that is still sort of in the detailed design stages, so that likely won't hit the ground until sometime next year, I would say.
What kind of stuff has been sort of proposed for that area?
It's going to be a surface level transit facility. It's going to be our exchange downtown, and it'll provide connection to north and south and then west to the university.
Okay. Kind of like that little section sort of to the left of Thrifty's there.
It will replace that, yes.
So the city is now looking at an early feedback and development stage for upgrading the Country Club Exchange as well. Can you give a rough timeline on what that development stage looks like and when the project might expect to break ground?
The Country Club area, sort of as a high level view, was identified through the city plan, and the transit redevelopment strategy is probably one of our, definitely one of our key transit exchange points. It's also been identified by the province as a transit-oriented area, which carries with it some very specific land use requirements. And so right now, what we're doing is looking at the area as a whole, because it's actually timed quite nicely with a number of pieces of infrastructure that need to be renewed. So Norwell Drive needs to be repaved. The signals need to be reconstructed with new equipment. There's some underground utilities that also need to be renewed. So we're taking this opportunity to look at the area as a whole in light of all of this new legislation and bylaws and planning requirements to sort of really ensure that what we put forward really sets the stage for the future. And so at this point, we're pretty early days. We've gone out to the community with a preliminary survey, kind of trying to get a gauge on how people move through the area and what potential barriers or challenges they're currently facing, so that we can then feed that into a more kind of technical assessment to sort of prove out the potential options of, whether the transit exchange is best suited where it is, or maybe there's possibly another location that might better serve the community into the future. The hope was the plan, I should say, is to roll forward with all of this sort of information gathering, feed that back into the sort of more detailed planning and functional planning phase over the sort of latter part of this year, early part of next year, and then migrate that into a detailed design with the intent of building something in 2026.
So that's going to be, at least a year of getting feedback and then another almost a year probably of design before things start really coming together and changing in that area then.
It is going to be a bit of time because some of the questions that we are contemplating are fairly significant. And so we want to make sure that we really listen to what the community is asking for. And so that we can make sure that, as I say, when we rebuild these things, we build them with longevity.
A few days ago, I went down to the Country Club bus terminal and conducted some short interviews with public transport users. Several expressed that they felt the downtown exchange was a high priority for upgrades, followed by Country Club. Since this is exactly what the city is doing, I wanted to ask kind of what goes into the decision making of making the priority for these projects.
Looking back to sort of the evolution of the downtown exchange, like citing a transit exchange downtown has been a discussion for, I'm going to say, well over a decade, maybe even two. But then in 2017, 2018, we did a review of downtown and undertook what we called the Downtown Mobility Hub study. And at that time, council was very supportive of taking action downtown and trying to build back. And so, the Front Street cycle track and the work on terminal and the rebuilding of a lot of vacant parcels, as well as the transit exchange were all sort of byproducts of that work. And so now with the adoption of City Plan and the Regional District's Transit Redevelopment Strategy, we've kind of looked at that in alignment with some of the capital projects the city needs to take on just to maintain existing infrastructure. And so there happened to be this synergy between Norwell Drive and the Country Club Exchange, which then, at the end of last year was then sort of further pushed with the provincial legislation around the TOAs. And so that just very organically became the next place to look at and to identify investments in.
So things are moving much more quickly with this particular project then?
I think there were a lot of lessons learned with the downtown exchange. And so we're able to learn from those, take them away, and then move into this one. And I think this sort of alignment of bylaws and provincial legislation and infrastructure reaching end of life all has sort of given us a strong boost to move through with it.
The Nanaimo Reimagine plan is calling for an increased transit access in areas of the city with high demand growth. How do you define a high demand growth area, and what about the country club area sort of fits this definition?
I think the definition you're probably alluding to is the urban center land use. Mm-hmm. And so what we see that is these areas that are fundamentally live, work, play. We want to create an environment where, residents are not dependent on a personal vehicle. And so with that, we need to understand that it needs to be a very walkable neighborhood, but also is supported by transit infrastructure to connect to services that may not be explicit to that neighborhood. We understand that not every neighborhood is going to have every restaurant or shop or other amenity that we'd like to see, at least not in the short term. And so this sort of integration between the walking and the transit really is critical to improving the livability in these neighborhoods. It also, having that more densified land use actually puts a bit of a lower pressure on other pieces of infrastructure. And so we don't have to spread out our underground utilities quite as far to provide the same service to the same number of residents. So there's a lot of compelling arguments to have these smaller, more compact communities, from a residence experience, but also from a city's ability to serve them.
Interesting. So places that are already expanded in this urban way, like the country club area with a lot of sort of surrounding close-knit suburbs, that actually makes it easier to grow that area then.
To some degree, yes. I think that there's also a bit of a natural opportunity in the way the transit system is already laid out. One of the key routes for transit is the express route, which fundamentally goes up and down Highway 19A. And so when we've got downtown on Terminal, Country Club right on 19A, Nanaimo North Town Center fairly close to 19A, and then Woodgrove again right at the junction of 19 and 19A, like these are very natural places to have very reliable transit service to connect between the different urban centers. We also have these sort of traditional mall sites that have tremendous development opportunity. And I think if we look to the Lower Mainland, you can see sort of a lot of these very traditional sites redeveloping into the sort of communities that we're aspiring to have this densification and higher service per area build up.
How is the city planning to balance upgrading North End locations like Country Club and North Town Center and Woodgrove versus South End areas like Cedar Extension and Chase River?
It's a bit tricky. There's a bit of natural market tendency. The Country Club one was quite opportunistic because the infrastructure was at end of life and all of the other supporting documents. Woodgrove is one that also has a huge amount of development potential It's a car centric, but does have a lot of amenities already. When we look to the south, sort of our area of focus for for urban centers is the Southgate area. So around the 10th Lawler Junction area, but there's definitely development activity in the surrounding areas at a lower level of density. And I think that, it sort of speaks to the overall need for more housing in the city. It's just a question of what form and character it takes and which landowners this aligns with their timing for.
I see. So you're sort of waiting for market forces to push the opportunity to upgrade those particular areas in the south.
To some degree, yeah. I mean, it's when we're talking about changes to privately held land, the city really doesn't have a lot of direct control over it. We can definitely sort of set the stage to lay out what we hope to see in the area. But when it actually comes time to provide a development submission, that's up to the landowner and sort of trying to align that with our policy documents.
Midcoast Morning is made possible by the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Support Midcoast Morning and CHLY's nonprofit newsroom today by becoming a sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. Local news can't survive without your support. If you're listening to the podcast edition of Midcoast Morning, go and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast feed you use. It helps people find us.
The City of Nanaimo is surveying its citizens for input on what upgrades they would like to see from the Country Club Transit Exchange, which will be the next major transit project after the completion of the downtown exchange at Terminal Avenue. Today on the show, we have Jamie Rose, the Manager of Transportation for Nanaimo and overseer of these projects.
To return to the specifics of the Country Club project, on the explanatory map proposed for upgrades, Area 4 in black indicates the end of 107th Street facing Divers Lake as an area needing upgrades to pedestrian traffic. Would these upgrades provide any particular, an additional crossing point, for example, on the highway?
We have had conversations with the ministry, and they're definitely invested in the conversation. I mean, they do have generally their own needs that need to be met to provide that numbered highway with the service that's expected. Having said that, they are very aware that transit is a very important component of the transportation system now and going forward. And so they definitely are working to support us in whatever capacity possible. In regard to a crossing, say, to connect to the ENN trail, that's something that we're going to have to kind of work through the details on and sort of verify that is a good location for it, and then sort of what the process would be to incorporate that into a highway amendment or change. So it's definitely on the table, but it's something we have to talk through. One of the key things that we really need to have a good understanding of fairly quickly is what location best supports transit in the area. Once we can nail that down, then the other pieces will fall into place quite quickly. Should the transit exchange stay where it is, or is there another location that might be better to support the growth in the neighborhood?
Right, because the highway is separate from the sort of general city transport planning that the city has control over, because it's that much more sort of important to the whole of Vancouver Island. We
work with the ministry on numerous things because they do own and operate Highway 19A and 19, or the Parkway. Highway 19 or the Parkway is very, very much a regional road. I mean, it obviously provides service to the city and its residents, but it also is a primary lifeline to goods movement to the North Island and to the South Island. So that really has its own sort of operating needs. 19A is sort of going through a bit of a reflection right now to sort of revisit what its purpose is in our community. I mean, historically, it had a similar purpose to Highway 19, but there's definitely an opportunity to revisit that and sort of maybe look at it through a more urban lens and sort of contemplate what features might better support our community, not just through a city, but also through a provincial lens as to how we can all work together to meet our mobility objectives.
I also asked transit users when I was down there about the amenities that were most interesting from the list featured in the survey. Nearly everybody was excited about scooter charging and bike lockups, and the city has been seeing a consistent increase in biking infrastructure and support for that move. What does the future of Nanaimo's e-bike and scooter infrastructure look like in your mind?
There's definitely been massive support from council over the past, 6 years now to expand walking, biking infrastructure, and most recently support to amend our transportation bylaws to permit the electric kick scooters that we were seeing all over the place right now. And so also to incorporate some end-of-trip facilities downtown over the next 3 years. I've actually noticed even in the last couple of weeks, seeing cyclists on roads that I would say I haven't seen previously, Hammond Bay being one of them. I typically hear about how inhospitable it is to cyclists, and yet yesterday, I think I saw 5. And so I think that for a variety of reasons, we're going to continue to see growth in users for e-bikes, bikes, and the e-scooters. And so I think that if we can continue to provide this support with stronger infrastructure and more end-of-trip facilities, that trend will continue.
So several areas of the country club mobility upgrade sort of educational material indicate the need for complete streets. Can you describe what this would look like in the context of Norwell Drive, the street running along the uphill side of Country Club Mall?
Sure. So essentially complete streets it's a road or a corridor that has an appropriate amount of space for everybody. And so a number of years ago, when we updated our road standards to sort of align with the complete street principles, we heard very clearly from the community that cars wanted their own space, cyclists wanted their own space, and pedestrians wanted their own space. So this is when we sort of adopted the general form and character like we have on Metro Drive, where we have travel lanes that are suitable for the type of vehicles for the area. Metro Drive would have a different type of travel lane than, say, an industrial area where a larger vehicle would be expected. But then we also have a cycling area that is separated both from cars and pedestrians, and then a pedestrian area that's separated from bikes and cars as well. And so as Norwell as an example, I would expect to see fairly similar allocation of space. I think that being that this is an urban area that we're looking for more animation on the street, we would see bigger pedestrian area, and the objective of this would be to create more space to support things like street patios or things that kind of integrate the walking area with the adjacent businesses and really create sort of that street experience that, a lot of areas, say downtown or in other cities that have really that sort of dense, vibrant area either have created or have always had. And then we still have space for cyclists to navigate through. Obviously, we need to have a conversation about transit and how that fits in with the whole scheme, and how we would incorporate shelters and information and wayfinding and things of that nature. And then whenever there's an opportunity, finding a way to create some green space and have some street trees and things like that to sort of soften the overall feel of the corridor.
And that also has some engineering benefits and like water holding for like green spaces and shade and such.
Yep, definitely. So, an opportunity to create that tree canopy and create a bit of a reduction in hard surface is always beneficial. And if we can find ways to have some sort of rainwater capture as part of the landscaping, that's just another added benefit. So all of these things we need to kind of look at and go, okay, what can we fit where and how do we prioritize our space? And, if the transit exchange stays on Norwell Drive, how do we set the stage so that if adjacent properties redevelop, that they can be brought into that street experience?
Do you see this upgrade having any changes on the mall itself?
I think there's always potential. We do plan to have a direct conversation with the landowners there and kind of give them a bit of an opportunity to hear what we're thinking and weigh in on it and share with us any ideas they have. Because if there's any opportunity to create some synergy, then, it's huge mutual benefit. And so, maybe they've sort of been sitting on the fence thinking, well, maybe we should or maybe we shouldn't. And if we have this conversation, maybe that will sort of catalyze some action and create that opportunity to have a more integrated community.
Several people, when I was interviewing on the street, indicated while they were not personally hindered in accessing Norwell Drive's bus exchange, they were concerned about the steep staircases and long roundabout routes accessing that bus route. So in the world where we're assuming that it stays on Norwell Drive, what kind of mobility access can we see for scooters and wheelchairs and walkers in that case to either replace or to combine with those staircases from the mall?
It's kind of a tricky conversation because that's all on private property. And so this is fundamentally why we want to have a direct discussion with the landowners there and see how can this all be integrated so that we can address these challenges.
In a similar vein, one person noted that spacing between the crosswalks on Norwell Drive is large enough that it leads people to simply run across the street to get to their bus if it's coming the other way. How can upgrading the area minimize the need for crossing the street and rushing for the bus?
I think that's one of the sort of more detailed questions that we need to work through in actually programming the transit service. Because if we create a circumstance where riders do need to or feel they need to cross somewhere other than at an intersection, I think we've probably not planned it very well. And so as we're going through this exercise, we're trying to find ways to ensure that the different routes align with each other so that when somebody's trying to catch, jump from the 1 to the 7 or the 3 or the 5 or whichever it is, they don't have to, or they don't feel like they have to do something like that. We want to really make sure that the routes that logically connect with each other have a very legible and clear connection point that doesn't force some sort of undesirable instance like crossing outside an intersection.
This area is frequented also by children and teenagers from the Wellington Secondary and Rock City Elementary schools. What considerations might we expect for maintaining that safety for teenagers and other young people to access this sort of transit area?
I think that all sort of folds into our objective of creating a AAA facility, which we sort of refer to as all ages and abilities. Another term that's often used is the 8 to 80. And really what we want to do is create this streetscape that is completely safely and comfortably usable for everybody. And so within the footprint of the work that we're going to be doing, that will be fundamentally a design criteria.
Another common request I heard from my interviewees on the street was the extension of bus times past midnight, as well as just sort of general increases to the frequency of run times. As the city expands in population, did you expect to see a change in sort of a wider range of run times for buses?
It's definitely a possibility, being that the RDN operates the system and has to work with BC Transit to add hours of service to their overall programming. There's sort of a few tiers that we have to go through there to support growth and expansion of service, not just to increase frequency, but as you say, to expand hours of service. And I'm quite sure that is identified in the transit redevelopment strategy. I don't know at what point. Creating a reliable and comfortable service is obviously a high priority. And so however the city and the RDN have to work together to be clear with BC Transit that this is something that the community wants and needs, it's a process we'll have to work through.
And for the scope of the Country Club mobility upgrades, the map indicates the areas immediately surrounding the Country Club area. Will there be any other projects or intersections of the project which expand the area to increase connectivity with like Beban Center, Divers Lake, Departure Bay, or Rutherford?
There are definitely opportunities. At this point in time, this is sort of what's within our current financial plan. Our typical process is to take action in areas that have high need combined with a need to renew infrastructure, because that's our sort of our best economic investment. I believe there's some connections down Departure Bay Road sort of in the slightly more distant future. There's some other opportunities even further into the future as part of future phases of the Midtown water supply project to create some connections into Bevan. We're always looking for opportunities to build some new infrastructure, find ways to provide better connections into the community. But right now, this is sort of our next focus point.
After Country Club, what's next on the to-do list as far as major transit upgrades in Nanaimo?
Well, we are going to be starting to turn our attention towards Woodgrove because that is sort of in the next highest density area, though we don't have any capital projects planned in that area just yet. I think one of our sort of more program type tasks is going to be to continue to look at our existing transit stops to ensure that they are accessible. If they're not accessible, we're going to have to address that. In addition to that, we're just looking at ways to work with the RDN to sort of optimize the route, not the routing per se, but how the routes operate. So if there's anything we can do, for example, with our traffic signals to provide the buses with better flow, that's definitely something that we want to explore because that's a fairly good return on investment. Yeah, between downtown and Country Club and Woodgrove, that's a fairly comprehensive plan for the sort of foreseeable future.
Thanks so much for the interview, Jamie. Is there anything else you wanted to add on?
I think just that this is just going to be a really interesting project to go through and sort of hear what the community, not just the residents, but also the sort of surrounding businesses and landowners have to say, because I do think there's a huge amount of opportunity. And once we set the stage, it'll be great to watch it all unfold.
Thanks again, and have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
Thanks again to Jamie Rose and to the transit users at Country Club Centre who helped provide ideas and questions for this interview. You can provide your feedback with the survey for the Country Club mobility upgrades at getinvolvednanaimo.ca/country-club-mobility. That's our show for the day. Thank you for joining me. I'm Jack Corfield, fill-in host and producer of Midcoast Morning. Jesse Woodward is our executive producer, and Arby Frew is our technical advisor. You can sign up for CHLY's newsletter at chly.ca/subscribe for updates from our nonprofit newsroom. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band Waste Management. If you have a story you'd like us to cover, email us at news@chly.ca.
Midcoast Morning would not be possible without the funding of the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Midcoast Morning is a project of CHLY's nonprofit newsroom. Support nonprofit journalism in Nanaimo and on the Salish Sea today by becoming a monthly sustaining donor at $5 or more per month. Support the program at chly.ca/donate. If you're already a supporter, record a voice memo telling others where you're listening from and why they too should support our work. After you're done, you can email it to us. Finally, this program acknowledges and gives thanks to the Snuneymuxw First Nation as we broadcast and podcast from their traditional territory. Thanks for listening.